Here's the story from the New York Times. Lab leak most likely caused pandemic, Energy Department says. The conclusion, which was made with low confidence, came as America's intelligence agencies remain divided on the origins of the coronavirus. And I love, they have this picture of the virus factory in Wuhan. The Wuhan, Seamus Coughlin tweeted, remember when a virus emerged outside of this, in the city next to the virus factory? And they told you were crazy for claiming that the virus may have come from the city with the virus factory?
It seems crazy,
but anyway,
indeed.
So here's, real quick, just to show you a couple things so we get into this conversation. I'm not saying I trust the government, okay? The DOE is saying this is most likely, and I'm like, I agree. It's just one agency saying it's probably the case, and it probably is the case. But I want to show you these archives. Take you back in time. You want to read that one, Ian?
Says Tom Cotton keeps repeating a coronavirus conspiracy theory that was already debunked.
The Washington Post reported this February of 2020. They said, Senator Tom Cotton repeated a fringe theory suggesting that the ongoing spread of the coronavirus is connected to research in the disease-ravaged epicenter of Wuhan, China. Cotton referenced a laboratory in the city, the Wuhan National Biosafety Lab, blah, 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 blah. So, about that.
He should just
and then
make
we have this
this
one
headline
from,
his banner on Twitter.
Oh, he should. The New York Times. Senator Tom Cotton repeats fringe theory of coronavirus origins. In an interview on Fox News, the Arkansas lawmaker raised the unsubstantiated possibility that the new coronavirus originated in a high-security biochemical lab in China. And the New York Times, February 17th, 2020, called it a fringe theory. And so this is a couple days ago, this is 26, yesterday, lab leak most likely caused pandemic. What's it called when you say a bunch of stupid things and then have to, New York Times and the Washington Post have edited those articles to remove their stupidity from them because, everybody's basically saying, well, the virus probably escaped the place that make coronaviruses.
I remember seeing this on Tucker Carlson right around that time. It was either the same day he made that statement or the day after. And thinking to myself, this makes the most sense. There's a lab there. People don't really understand how many leaks occur at biosafety labs, even here in the United States. I mean, that's how people believe, what's the disease? Lyme disease. Yeah. A lot of people think Lyme disease was the product of a BSL lab leak that's on an island off the coast of New York. There's one in that was a big thing for a while. They were building one in Fort Detrick.
You don't get to make all these movies where the scientist gets pricked through their suit and they go, oh God, and they run out and then have people think these labs are completely safe.
Yeah, Lyme disease was found near Lyme, Connecticut.
Right.
And that's why they call it Lyme disease.
Correct.
They don't know exactly where or why. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I've heard the same thing, that it was done on an island, like a biomedical experiment.
I just like the idea that the federal government's like, but that only happens in movies. Movies are based completely on fiction. We would never do anything like it.
Yeah, even this announcement, it still says, we have concluded, meaning it is done, that it might have happened over there. We don't know.
It's the ultimate soft launch
Right.
of a explanation, right? You know, some girls soft launch their boyfriends on Instagram. The government is soft launching that they're admitting it was from the
A/B
lab.
testing.
We're low confidence. We're not sure, but we've done all of our research and we're basically pretty sure.
What's the likelihood that this is a casus belli for war with
Yeah,
with
this
China?
is definitely an opening for a war, for sure. If they needed one.
Well, right.
They're setting the stage.
Think of it this way. If China invades Taiwan, how does the United States get the American people to publicly support a war with China?
Blame all of COVID on them.
Exactly. Remember that your parents who died? It was China. Yeah, we just found that out. And then people are going to be screaming in the polls and the media will come out and they'll march in lockstep. But sure enough, you're still going to get... Actually, this is interesting. Let me walk... I was going to say something different. I'm going to walk it back a little bit. I'm curious. Would conservatives remain anti-war if the U.S. government came out definitively across the board and said, we have direct evidence that they were breaking international law with gain-of-function research and they caused the global pandemic?
I think so, because a lot of people know that Fauci was working with EcoHealth Alliance to do the research. So it wasn't just the Chinese. A lot of people are aware that Anthony Fauci and probably the U.S. government was involved as well. So I think that will be a loud noise being made and statement that's repeated, like Fauci was involved in this. And
what I'm asking is, the U.S. will want to go to war with China over Taiwan. Will conservatives now support international intervention?
Actually, I think it's the opposite, Ian. I think that's the reason that conservatives wouldn't support it, because, like, for me personally, I would say, well, why are we going to war with China until Fauci is put on trial, and
What if they do?
until everybody in the United States that had any part in this is dealt with, then we can talk about China, but only until that happens.
That's what I
think
meant.
it'd be hard to
Yeah.
sell that going to war would do anything. At
Do
this
anything,
point,
right, yeah.
Right?
What's the-
We're gonna send more people to die after putting them through everything we have for the past 3 years. With war, and maybe this is just a very rudimentary understanding of it. It's not like we'll take a chunk of land from China and then we'll be like, and that solves everything for COVID, right? Like, I could see issuing tons of economic sanctions. I could see breaking trade partnerships, but actually going to battle with them. I actually feel like if you just said it's about Taiwan, there are more Americans who'd be like, okay, sounds good, than
Yeah,
if you
I
said
agree.
COVID.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the people knowing that Fauci was involved in financing and working on the stuff through EcoHealth. People would not want to go to war because they know that Fauci was involved. So that would be like, I'm not going to buy the crap. You can't pin this on China. We know that there were American scientists involved in building this thing. At least evidence points to that.
Well, Fauci provided funding to EcoHealth, who then provided funding to Wuhan's lab or whatever.
We
It's
pay
like-
you to pay him to pay him to do it for me.
It's virus laundering or something.
I think really what this is just the long tail setup for their plan for the 2024 election. And I mean, I was thinking about this a year and a half ago, where especially if Trump runs again, they're gonna put COVID and the vaccines and all of it on Trump. That's what I think. I think they're gonna say, hey, he left Fauci in office. He pushed the vaccine through too quickly because he wanted to puff his chest up and show how good he was. And look at all these people that died as a result of Trump's ego. So it's all his fault. It's going to be just like, projection is their only tool. So
What if they come out and they say, we have now confirmed Wuhan was doing illegal gain-of-function research with the assistance of Anthony Fauci through circuitous funding, and thus we will be filing subpoenas and criminal referrals for Anthony Fauci, and then said, after they arrest him, we are going to go to war with China. So let me put it this way. China invades Taiwan. The U.S. says we're going to defend our allies in the region, but we can't be directly involved with China. Oh, whoa, China leaked the virus on purpose and caused all this damage. And hey, what's that? Fauci was involved. Fauci, you're under arrest. Hey, guys, can we go to war now?
I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I think conservative. I mean, I wouldn't really describe myself as a conservative particularly, but I think the sort of war hawk side of the party is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, with everything going on in Ukraine, and I really can't see a huge number of people being, especially China. I mean, you're talking about two world superpowers.
It feels like
going at each
opening
other.
another endless war, right? Like,
Yeah.
didn't we just get out of the Middle East in some respect?
And we're
Like,
already spending more money in Ukraine than we
Yeah.
spent in Afghanistan. I just can't.
You know-
it's so there's so much media now that the days of like the Gulf of Tonkin and these things where they can stage an event and they can get people riled up, and they've got this like dead zone before the truth really comes out, and then you get momentum going, and people are so afraid to go back on what they said. It's like the sunk cost fallacy. I just think that time is coming to an end these days.
I think
Everything's on video.
I think the U.S. I don't know. Maybe they're just realizing they can't keep lying about this, because any sane person. I mean, Jon Stewart goes on Colbert's show and says this makes the most sense. But I'm wondering. I guess I just put it this way. My prediction would be, in the event the U.S. does want to go to war, China invades Taiwan. The U.S. comes out and says, "Oh heavens! Oh, the lab leak. That was China's fault." The majority of the MAGA side of people, which includes some libertarians, independents, they all say no war. And then your McCarthy's and your McConnell's, your Lindsey Graham's are just like, everybody was ragging on China just 10 minutes ago, and we can't allow this. You can't change your mind and now act like they're the good guys. And then the Democrats are all going to come out and be like, China's always been the bad guy. What are you guys talking about? Conservatives, you're always defending Xi Jinping. And
Hillary Clinton's like, I loved Vladimir Putin all of these years.
well, no, they'll still hate Russia, but they're going to come out and be like, why won't you support our wars? And then every journalist, every news outlet's going to come out. Every poll's going to be like, we surveyed 5 billion people and found that 95% want war with China. So if you don't agree, you're a weirdo. And then you're going to get a bunch of normie people in cities being like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess World War III or whatever.
I bet if they were to be like, and by the way, Anthony Fauci is involved, something, Anthony Fauci would be like, and by the way, I have documents of Barack Obama being involved, Bill Clinton being involved. I have evidence of the Clinton Foundation being involved. Like,
if it was all
Fauci
that, though,
is the nexus of this stuff, and he knows everybody that's working on this.
I mean, he's very specifically NIH, but it would be funny if just like some guy no one ever heard of shows up, and then he just starts putting out all this evidence on all of these people, and it's like the government's actually run by someone like some shadow government no one ever heard of, like an Epstein level guy. I mean, because the reality is that there's probably some big corporate lobbyists. Shout out to Woody Harrelson. He's talking about these cartels. There's probably some big corporate lobbyists that you've never heard of, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, whatever, who come to these people, these politicians, tell them what they need in exchange for funding, and you've never heard of these people.
Yeah, and they'll
That's a crazy
send
thought, huh?
someone to talk to the politician, so the politician doesn't even know who the people are.
So it's not even like shadow government conspiracy level stuff. It's like we know these big investment firms exist. We don't know who's doing the principal lobbying, but the politicians do.
Yeah.
That's true.
They know who's coming to them and telling them like, look, we need this bill passed. Otherwise, your PAC's not getting the $100 million. And they're like, but if I don't get that, I don't win. You're right. So better get the bill passed. And they go, you got it, boss.
Oh, they're already, don't those guys already investing in Ukraine, BlackRock? And
Oh, yeah.
and
I mean, that's what I
talking
heard.
about what an opportunity it is.
And think about the war debt Ukraine's going to have.
Oh,
This war is actually, it's more like the U.S. is conquering Ukraine. All the money being given to Ukraine will justify the U.S. owning the whole thing, or I should say Europe and NATO owning the whole thing. Because in the event that Russia loses, Vladimir Zelensky is going to be like, yay, freedom. Now, don't forget, you owe BlackRock $100 billion.
Yeah.
And you will never pay it back.
Well, just like China has the Belt and Road Initiative, right, where they're subsidizing the building of infrastructure in third world countries, especially in Africa. They're paying for the cell towers and the freeways, and that's because they can get the data from the cell towers, in particularly. But they want them to be beholden, and I think that's sort of what we do is we go in and destroy everything first, and then we rebuild it in the way that we think we want to, in the way that benefits our investors and these big capital firms. So, we're fine to watch Ukraine get shelled into oblivion, which is what's happening, right? I mean,
Because not only do they have the $100 billion in debt already, but after the war ends, our firms, or I shouldn't say our, but international firms come in and say, okay, now you're going to rack up another $500 billion in debt as we rebuild your country for you.
Yeah.
And we will own you forever.
they're not going to have the infrastructure left at the end. So the fact of the matter is they can't rebuild their country without concrete plants and, steel, fiber optics, all these things that they're not going to have the capability to make. So we can go in there and do it for them. And that's really the profit motivation for those companies.
And build a smart grid to track and database.
Yeah, smart
people.
grid, right. We got to upgrade it. Everything's going to be Wi-Fi and wireless now. And
it used to be that the U.S. would invade a foreign piece of land and liberate it. At least in one instance, the Spanish, the Spanish-American War at the end of the 1800s, they went into Cuba, the Americans, and they liberated Cuba from the Spanish Empire, and Cuba became its own thing. The U.S. didn't even want it. They weren't like, pay us back. As far as I know, they didn't want to extort them or anything. So Cuba was free, and then Cuba became communist and very dangerous for the Americans. So we should invade, is what you're saying.
I'm
wondering, like, when we do go in to liberate, is it better that we leave Americans there to control it, or do we actually just let them be totally free? Because freedom isn't free. We have freedom in the United States because we have dudes with guns pointing them at all the bad guys and forcing this area to maintain the semblance of what we have defined as freedom.
Maybe we should invade these countries and then put our troops there for 20 years and then build military bases all around.
30 years.
30 years.
Because that doesn't work either. I mean, not really.
No.
South Korea seems to be working.
Puerto Rico, did we do that in Puerto
what
Rico?
we should do is invade the country and then hand an AR-15 to every single citizen and say, now you guys are on your own.
I don't know, man.
You've got a fair fight with the government now. You have what we have, which is the only thing that has kept our country from being different from the rest of the world.
I
we're going to
disagree.
liberate you by, we are going to install the Second Amendment, the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, and then we're going to
I don't think it would
leave
work.
you to your devices.
I don't think it would work.
You don't think so?
either.
Nope. The American colonies had moral structures and
Shared culture.
shared culture, moral foundations, and classical liberal principles. They were shared among the founding fathers. So they were kind of like, leave me alone.
Fair.
And that worked. You go to a place where it's like authoritarian religious fanatics and give them a bunch of guns, then you're going to get 15 different sects just shooting each other nonstop for 50 years. I'm not saying we should go there and change things. I'm saying cultures need to develop and get to that point, there's perhaps diplomacy that we could employ that might help, put them in a direction we think would ultimately reduce violence and increase prosperity. But I don't think guns. A First Amendment, probably. Give people the right to speak freely, share ideas, and you
Doesn't exist, though, without the Second
Yeah.
Amendment. That's the problem. I mean, I think that's really,
No, that's a good point. Yep. We
think-
want them to be able to speak freely, but then the government comes and beat the crap out of them.
Yeah. I think it's hard to accept that if we were to go into a different country and say, you guys are free to decide what you want, that they may install a system that, number one, doesn't work. Like, do we go back then and fix it? And also, they may pick a system that we don't like, right? Like, if communism is what ultimately Cuba decided would work, I'm not saying it did, but that was what came out on top when they were allowed to pick, I would not, if I were, John Kennedy or whatever, I would not want to be like, yes, Cuba, you just have your communism and hang out over here while we have democracy. But on the other hand, do you just keep going in and saying like, no, you have to do it our way, you have to do it our way, you have to do it our way, especially like we were saying before, if there are countries that are dominated by cultural or religious pressures that are so dissimilar to what we were founded on. Like, we don't have the same kind of basic needs that other civilizations do.
I was talking to Ali London on the Culture War podcast with Tim Pool. Check it out on Apple and Spotify and youtube.com/Timcast. One of the interesting things he said to me, shameless plug, was that in Korea, they all get surgery to look like European people. Like, they'll get their chins shaved down, and they'll get their noses, they'll get nose implants to make their noses bigger, and they'll get their eyes made to be wider with surgery so they can look like white people. And it's a normal thing for all of them. Mm-hmm. We thought it was, like, we talk about how crazy it is that a British guy would want to get surgery to look Korean. But to him, he said he was living in Korea. That was normal. Mm-hmm. Everybody was getting surgery to look like the specific thing. So he was trying to look like they were. Mm-hmm. I don't think the U.S. occupying South Korea, whatever you call it, whatever you want, has necessarily been good for them. But certainly it's been better than if it was North Korea the communists that took over. So yeah, I don't know. It's like they went in the complete other direction. But it's still better, I guess.
It's tough to talk with confidence about life in Korea because I've never been. But from Yeonmi Park's first-hand perspective, she's a North Korean defector, I guess you call it. She was able to escape the country because you can't leave freely. I believe that North Korea is absolutely one of the biggest pieces of hell on earth of any nation.
Imagine.
100%.
Well, and South Korea, yes, there are Western beauty standards that become a part of culture. But on the other hand, like, America has never generated anything like the K-pop industry, right? Producing K-pop stars who then go through plastic surgeries to look American. Like, we never mastered. Like, Korean culture is still strong and it has some interpretations of Western influence, but I would never say that it's lost its culture to a Western identity.
I went to a shopping area in Seoul, and they had this advertisement for like Chicago pizza, and then one of the pizza varieties was black squid ink, and I'm just like, we don't have that in Chicago, but it's tourist stuff.
What? No way.
Yeah, it's like I went to Thailand and I went to get pad Thai, and I was like, I want squid, and then my Thai friend started laughing at me, and he was like, bro, it just means like shrimp and noodles. Like, you're asking for shrimp and noodles, but like, imagine ordering a cheeseburger but with chicken. Just order a chicken sandwich. And I'm like, I don't know. In America, we have like Americanized Thai food. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's like, you want to go get real Thai food? And then he brought me to an actual restaurant, and we sit down, and you know what real Thai food is? It was steamed chicken and rice. I was in Brazil, and I was like, I want real Brazilian food. He's like, all right, we got steak and rice.
Yeah.
There's like nothing complicated about it. Like, people around the world typically eat a lot of this similar things. Different spices depending on the area, but in America, we dump sugar, fat, and oil on it.
Everything. Yeah.
Spice it a certain way, and we're like, if there's like brown sugar, vinegar, ginger, it's Chinese. If it's curry, it's Indian. But in reality, it's like, not really. I think a lot of the Indian food was invented in Britain anyway.
Yeah. There's a really interesting documentary about the spread of Kung Pao chicken and like how that was developed, and especially as you came to America and you had these Chinese restaurants, there were a couple really high-end, culinary experiences, but a lot of them were considered sort of cheap or convenient meals, and they spread throughout the U.S. and so they had to come up with a dish that was like palatable to Americans that they would eat, but also wasn't so complicated that they would not want to eat it. It's similar to the man who founded Taco Bell. He was like, I'm going to. He grew up in California, and he grew up wanting to have a hamburger stand. He was like a kid in the Depression. Then he went to war, and then he came back and was like, there are hamburger stands everywhere, so I got to do something else. And there was a Mexican influence in the area he grew up in. And so he was like, I'll make tacos, but I'll make them with flour tortillas and with lettuce, and basically like made it the most simple, like it gets compared to a hamburger. It's not really a traditional Mexican taco, but at the same time, it's something that people will eat and they recognize the flavor. It's not too intimidating.
I'm pretty sure when they introduced Taco Bell to Mexico, they called it American food. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.